Hey, Plaid Man here. How's it going? Plaidites, fellow Plaidites. So I am rocking a plaid shirt. Got a jacket, of course, because I always have to have one color up for some silly reason. And then I have a wonderful stitch shirt that my lady got me. That's super adorable. I'm not doing a good justice of it. It's super adorbs. So then she has the matching one, which has, I think the name is Angel, like the pink stitch. Anyways, super cute shirt. We just locked in, well, locked in as far as the decision-making process, what location we were going to have our wedding at, which was kind of a big deal because apparently I was being very controlling and very like, oh, we're going to do this way, and it was just very frustrating. And I'm learning, still got a lot to learn, the great art of like, okay, what do you want to do, babe? It's fine. I feel like I've spent a lot of my life like, hey, these are things I want, and like everything else I'm pretty chill with. But I'm also realizing that I have a long way to go. And interestingly enough, it's not, at least to me, it's not a compromise about like, oh, well, yeah, I mean, I want this, but like, okay, I'll do what you want. Like, that's not how I look at it. It's just like, generally speaking, food is a good example. Like, I don't really care what I eat. I mean, I care. I'm trying to eat healthier because I got a wedding coming up. I got to look good. But it's not so much like, hey, oh yeah, no, I have to eat this. And if we don't eat this, then I'm going to be super miffed. So I've learned that there is a value in, okay, find out what, perhaps there are people in your group or in your relationship where they have a preference on a certain thing. And if you don't, then I think there's a lot of value in like allowing that person to make that decision and kind of guide. And I have a fun habit of what my lady likes to call following from the front, which is what it is. Maybe I got long legs and I like to walk fast. I don't know. It's a silly thing that we learned at like Disneyland, where a while back is where it came about, where it's just like, I didn't know anything, like I didn't know where anything was in Disneyland. And she's like, okay, we're going here. And I'm like, okay, cool. And I just start walking in a direction as if I know where it is, which I don't. I didn't. And I probably don't now still. And she'd have to be like, no, babe, go right. Okay, go left. And I had to, I still do it now. It's silly. That isn't what I wanted to talk about today, though. There's actually a couple things I've done now a couple movie, I think 2 movie reviews. There's a book review I wanted to do. I'm not going to do it today. However, and goodness gracious, I meant to bring the darn book out. There's this terrific line, and I'm going to paint the picture for you, okay? It's from one of my favorite books, which I will do a book review on, called Triplanetary, which is a very old book from an awesome science fiction series called the Lensman series. And there was, I've now listened to the audiobook. I've read the book several times. I really enjoy it. It's a terrific book. But there was specifically a line in there that when I listened to it, I was just like, it almost took me back. Like, almost took me out of the story in an odd way, because of how it was written. Like, he's describing these characters and they're doing this thing, and then all of a sudden it was almost like he spoke directly to you, the reader, and was like, hey, don't do this. Now, I'll just give you the subject matter. Basically, he was describing 2 heroes. It was a part of the story, who in the very beginning, so I'm not giving anything away. It's in the first 20 pages. They're heroes, in a sense, and they're talking about a thing, and then they resolve whatever they're talking about, and then they proceed to, after a gladiatorial fight, they're like, okay, cool, let's watch the Christians be massacred, right? And for those of you that don't know, this was a not so uncommon occurrence during Roman times, where they would gather up Christians and then put them in the gladiatorial pits and put them in the Colosseum and string them up, or have lions attack them or whatever. And it was a form of entertainment. And by today's standards, it's obviously grotesque. And that was kind of the point, is that these 2 guys were enjoying it. And they're like sitting down to enjoy this experience, almost as if like you sit down and enjoy a Netflix show. And what was amazing to me, and I wish, I'm sorry, I should have memorized the exact thing. Either way, effectively what his point was is, do not judge these men by your standards today, because these were men of their time. These were men who were hardened by vicious combat, and every day could have been their last, and they were men of their time. And I felt like maybe that's a bit, I understood what he was trying to say and what he did communicate, because he did a terrific job. And to me, I feel like that, maybe not the same level, but to a greater or lesser degree, I feel like a lot of people could learn that lesson today, in the sense of they look back at history and they like to throw shade on and talk bad about and assume that they wouldn't do things that people in the past did do. Okay? A good example would be people saying, like the founding fathers. They like to say, oh, well, Thomas Jefferson, I think Ben Franklin, George Washington, these founding fathers of America, all of them, they had slaves at one point or another, or they did this, or they did that. And it's very interesting because these people are talking about stuff that usually they don't know very much about. Like, it's not like they read a George Washington, a book about George Washington's life. No. At best, they like did some history in school, and they're like, yeah, George Washington. And then they heard, oh, George Washington had slaves, and they're like, he's a horrible person. And it's just like, okay, just because somebody had slaves back then does not make them a bad person. It doesn't. Because at the time, that's how they got things done. It'd be equivalent to, let's say, you have a person who has a business and they have 100 employees, right? And what they did, they did that and they treated them a certain way. And then fast forward 50 years from now, and a similar company with 100 employees, they get paid 10 times more. They get a boatload more benefits and yada, yada, yada. And you're like, oh my gosh, how dare this company, 50 years ago not offer these benefits and this and this and this and this and this and all these things? How dare they? They're a horrible company. I can't believe that we allowed that to happen and exist. And it's just like, whoa, hold up. 50 years ago, things were different. And this was 200 plus years ago. Things were very different, okay? Hey, slavery was legal. So it's not like they were breaking the law. Now, is slavery in general okay? No, it's generally not okay. But people also seem to forget, especially with slavery, and this is not supposed to be a slavery discussion, but especially with slavery, it's like, hey, every culture throughout history of every shade of color enslaved other people. The primary way that slaves got to America in the first place is other black communities captured other colonies next to them that were also black, and then sold them to white slavers who transported them over to America. If you don't know this, you should probably do some research. If you're annoyed, fine, be annoyed. So this isn't supposed to be about slavery. What this is supposed to be about, what kind of like clicked for me when I read this in the book, and I just felt like it was very fascinating perspective, is that so many people today are judging people in the past, usually people in the past who are responsible for why they are the way they are today, why the society is as good as it is today. They're literally standing on their forefathers' shoulders, and they're complaining and saying like, well, what the heck? Why are they not operating by today's standards? And it's like, the reason why you have today's standards is because of those people. So it's all well and good to be like, hey, we don't want to have that today. Like, we don't want to have slavery today because it's horrible. So glad it's gotten rid of. We don't want to have racism today. It's horrible. So glad we got rid of it. We want women to vote because having them not vote was horrible. So glad we changed it. All right. For instance, but to judge a person historically based on how they were then is really naive and really just an oversimplified way to look at history. It is imperative to look at how was the person acting at the time? What was the accepted normal thing of the time? And I mean, if they're within that boundary, if they're within this boundary and that's what's accepted for the time, then okay. Then just like you, like, okay, right now, you wouldn't look at someone askance necessarily if they met someone online and then met them in person and then they slept with them the same night. Well, hey, fun fact, if you did that 70 years ago, everybody would ostracize you. You remember, or even more. Further back, they'd put an A on your clothing. They'd call you a whore, this, that, and the other. Similarly, hey, fun fact, like, I don't know, 100 years ago or something like that, if you were a single mom with a kid, you know, a single mom, society on the whole would be like, oh, you're a horrible person. Things change. Things adapt. People change. Sometimes for the better, mostly for the good. Arguably, where we were 250 years ago, 100 years ago, even 50 years ago, arguably things are better than they were then. Okay? Fun fact, look around your kitchen. Look at all these things. You got water running inside your kitchen, hot and cold. You got a refrigerator, so things will stay cold for a long time. If you want food, you can just go to a grocery store and grab it. Or if you don't even want to do that, you can just order online and it'll be delivered. Like, these are amazing things that even kings didn't have access to 300 years ago, 200 years ago. Those things were built brick by brick on top of people that you might detest now. But because of what they did then and the actions that they did, others following them could build off of it. So for you or any other person to just say, oh, well, they were a horrible person. It's like, okay, maybe by today's standards, yeah, but you don't know how they would be today. You don't know if George Washington was born today, how would he be? I don't think he'd be like, oh, you know what I want to do is just have a bunch of slaves. Like, no, he wouldn't. That's a ridiculous thought process. So just kind of stop with this concept. Stop with this, like, hey, we just need to destroy anyone that doesn't agree with today's standard. And also, I'd like to point out, today's standard keeps changing. Like, literally within days, all of a sudden, we went from, oh, well, this is acceptable. Oh, now that's not acceptable. This is acceptable. And then that's not acceptable. And the goalposts keep shifting. So understand that there's going to be a lot of flux. And I'll perhaps get into the whole goalpost shifting and that whole thing. But what really, again, to focus in on this, the thing is, you have these two gladiators who were hard men living in a hard time. And they're basically enjoying what at the time was entertainment for them to, kill Christians in a gladiatorial pit. And they were enjoying it. And the author had enough forethought to be like, hey, look, don't judge these men by your time. Understand that they were men of their time. They were living a hard life and so on and so forth. And to me, I just felt like there was a tremendous value in that we could all learn from, hopefully, being students of history and just understanding the basics of how things work, that you need to understand that you are making history right now, and that the reason why you can do these things, the reason why I can make a video right now and you could see it, is built on the backs of, literally on the backs of people before us. So it's well and good to say, hey, today, that's not acceptable today. But I can also appreciate and value that they had to go through these things. And I don't know and you don't know if you were born in that time, what you would have done. You don't know. There's no way. You like to think. Everyone likes to think in Tenet. I think they said it. The movie Tenet. If you haven't seen it, it's terrific. I'll do a movie review on it. But there's this line in there where it's just like everyone wonders what they would do if the house was on fire. Like if someone was in a house, would you run in and go and save them? Everyone wonders, that's a thing that you think about, perhaps in the back of your mind. And you can't really know. You like to think so, but you can't really know until there's a house that's on fire and you're put in that situation. So understand that if you're reading something in history that you don't particularly like, perhaps you can just understand that, hey, they were men of their time, and read between the lines. Like specifically with the Founding Fathers, there's a lot of evidence to illustrate that they did not like and wanted to handle, a lot of them did at least, the slavery issue and not having slaves be legal. And it was a very complex and difficult thing that made it so that they couldn't, or felt like it was not viable for them to free the slaves. So before you just cancel someone who has been dead many, many years and oftentimes many generations, realize that they were different people of different times and try and understand from their perspective. You can't walk a mile in their shoes, but you can get pretty darn close, because history is a thing. You can read history books and try and understand how they came to the decisions that they came to. Anyways, that's it. Plaid Man out. I'm not trying to make longer videos. It's just, this was a thing and I just wanted to talk about it. So anyways, talk to you people later. Rock and roll. Please like, subscribe, comment. I'm appreciating the comments. I haven't yet gotten around to like responding to them, but I am liking them. So I'm reading them and acknowledging that you wrote them. Thank you very much. Please contribute and continue. And it's okay if you disagree with me. And also, if you have anything where you're like, hey, talk about this, or, you know, maybe you got inspired and you wanted to know my opinion on something else, by all means, I look forward to reading it. Thank you all. Talk to you later. Plaid Man out.